Transmigrated as the rejected concubine. Now the Alpha Emperor wants me as his queen. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, we have one small favor to ask. Please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our new videos. It only takes a moment. It is completely free, and it is one of the best ways to support us as we continue creating emotional, dramatic, and unforgettable stories like this one. Your support truly means everything to us. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is in your part of the world right now. We always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel and meeting viewers from around the globe. Now let us begin today's story. The people who change history are almost never the ones history expects. Lysander's last memory of his previous life was closing a novel on his apartment couch after another exhausting day, wondering why every story seemed to reward power instead of kindness. The next heartbeat shattered that ordinary world forever. When he opened his eyes again, he was no longer surrounded by modern walls and city lights. Instead, he found himself lying inside an elegant but forgotten chamber filled with faded silk curtains, cracked jade ornaments, and the lingering scent of incense. A dull ache spread through his body as unfamiliar memories rushed into his mind like a river breaking through a dam. He was no longer himself. He had awakened inside the body of a young concubine named Lysander Ashwin, a quiet figure abandoned deep within the imperial palace after falling from favor. Servants rarely visited his residence. The nobles pretended he no longer existed. Even the palace records described him as someone whose future had already ended. As the overwhelming memories settled, another strange phenomenon appeared before his eyes. A transparent screen shimmered in the air. Transmigration complete. Identity confirmed. Hidden mission activated. Survive the imperial palace. Hidden objective locked. Before Lysander could question the mysterious message, the screen dissolved into countless glowing fragments. He slowly stood and walked toward a bronze mirror resting beside the window. Looking back at him was a graceful young man with pale skin, long silver blonde hair, gentle blue eyes, and elegant features that seemed almost unreal. His simple white robes had clearly belonged to someone once respected, yet time and neglect had stolen their beauty. He quietly exhaled, reminding himself that panic would solve nothing. If he had truly entered another world, understanding it would matter far more than fearing it. Hours passed peacefully until hurried footsteps echoed outside his chamber. Two frightened servants rushed through the doorway before quickly lowering their heads. "His Majesty is returning from the northern provinces today," one whispered nervously. "The entire palace has been ordered to prepare." The other servant glanced at Lysander with visible sympathy. "Remain inside. The Emperor has never visited this wing. Nothing will change." Their words should have been comforting, yet something deep inside Lysander's heart felt strangely unsettled. Drawn by an instinct he could not explain, he quietly left the abandoned residence after sunset and wandered through silent palace gardens illuminated by thousands of glowing lanterns. Crystal streams reflected the evening sky while ancient white trees stretched gracefully above marble pathways. Everything felt impossibly beautiful, yet beneath that beauty lingered an invisible loneliness that mirrored his own. As he reached a forgotten pavilion hidden beside a tranquil lake, an enormous stone monument suddenly released a faint silver glow. Ancient carvings spread across its surface, revealing symbols that no ordinary court official could recognize. The moment Lysander stepped closer, the monument responded to his presence. A warm light gently surrounded him before fading into the night air. At that exact moment, somewhere beyond the gardens, Emperor Cassian Valerius paused in the middle of an imperial corridor. Advisors continued discussing matters of state, yet the emperor heard none of their words. He slowly turned toward the distant palace gardens, his calm silver eyes filled with quiet surprise. For years, an ancient prophecy had remained silent. Tonight, for the first time since he inherited the throne, he felt its sacred presence awaken once again. Without hesitation, he dismissed every attendant and walked alone toward the forgotten gardens, unaware that the abandoned concubine everyone had already forgotten was about to become the most important person in the history of the empire. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness is enough to awaken a destiny that an entire empire has forgotten. Lysander stood motionless beneath the glowing stone monument, as the last traces of silver light faded into the quiet night. His heartbeat slowly returned to normal, yet the strange warmth lingering within his chest refused to disappear. The mysterious monument had clearly reacted to his presence, but before he could examine the ancient carvings more closely, soft footsteps echoed across the marble pathway. Instinctively, he stepped back into the shadows beneath the flowering white trees. Moments later, Emperor Cassian Valerius entered the forgotten garden alone. Unlike the frightening ruler described in the memories of the original concubine, the man before him carried himself with quiet dignity instead of arrogance. His elegant black ceremonial robes reflected the moonlight, while his calm silver eyes carefully searched the peaceful garden without hostility. Cassian eventually stopped before the ancient monument and gently placed one hand upon its weathered surface. The glow had already disappeared, yet his thoughtful expression suggested he understood that something extraordinary had just happened. Without warning, a cool evening breeze carried several delicate white blossoms from the surrounding trees. One flower drifted toward the emperor before falling onto the marble path. Lysander quietly stepped forward, picked up the blossom, and offered it back with both hands. For several silent seconds, neither of them spoke. Cassian accepted the flower with a faint smile that seemed genuine rather than ceremonial. "Thank you," he said softly. His voice carried surprising warmth. Lysander respectfully lowered his head, expecting the brief encounter to end. Instead, the emperor studied him with quiet curiosity. "You live in the western residence," Cassian observed. Lysander nodded. "Yes, your majesty." There was no accusation in the emperor's gaze, only calm interest. "The records describe that residence as abandoned." Lysander answered honestly. "The records are older than I am." A gentle smile appeared across Cassian's face before quickly fading into thoughtful silence. Rather than asking more questions, he simply looked once more toward the ancient monument. "Some places wait many years before revealing their purpose," he murmured. Perhaps tonight was one of those nights. Before leaving the garden, the emperor turned back once more. "Walk safely." With that, he quietly disappeared into the moonlit corridor without issuing a single command. Lysander remained standing beneath the white trees, unable to understand why such a brief conversation felt strangely familiar. The following morning, unexpected news spread throughout the palace. Imperial servants hurried through every corridor carrying new furnishings, elegant fabrics, and rare books. Confused whispers filled the courtyards as everyone tried to discover which influential noble had received the emperor's attention. By midday, several attendants arrived outside Lysander's neglected residence carrying polished wooden chests filled with fresh clothing, warm blankets, carefully prepared meals, and beautifully restored furniture. The elderly steward respectfully bowed before speaking. "By direct order of His Majesty, this residence will be restored immediately." Shock spread among the nearby servants. No forgotten concubine had ever received such unexpected kindness from the throne. As workers quietly transformed the once-neglected residence into a peaceful home, Lysander noticed something unusual resting inside one of the wooden chests. It was an ancient silver pendant engraved with the same unfamiliar symbol that had appeared upon the glowing monument the previous evening. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, the pendant released a faint pulse of white light. At the same instant, deep beneath the imperial palace, an enormous hidden archive sealed for centuries responded to the identical symbol, and countless forgotten shelves slowly awakened, as if recognizing that the one they had silently awaited had finally returned. The oldest truths are never hidden by walls. They are hidden inside memories that no one dares to question. Lysander carefully held the ancient silver pendant as its gentle warmth slowly spread through his fingertips. The faint white light faded almost immediately, yet the strange connection between the pendant and the palace beneath his feet lingered in his heart. Before he could investigate further, the elderly steward politely returned to inform him that Emperor Cassian had arranged permission for him to visit the imperial library whenever he wished. The unexpected invitation surprised everyone serving within the western residence. Forgotten concubines were rarely granted access to ordinary palace archives, much less the oldest collection of imperial records. Lysander quietly thanked the steward and decided to visit the library the following morning. At sunrise, soft golden light poured across polished marble corridors as he entered the magnificent archive for the first time. Towering shelves stretched toward an ornate ceiling painted with stars, while crystal windows illuminated thousands of ancient scrolls preserved with extraordinary care. Elderly librarians greeted him respectfully without displaying the curiosity he had expected. It almost felt as though someone had quietly prepared them for his arrival. As Lysander wandered through the peaceful halls, the silver pendant resting beneath his robes grew warmer with every step. Without consciously choosing a direction, he followed the sensation until he reached an isolated chamber hidden behind an enormous carved bookshelf. At its center stood a circular stone table engraved with the same unfamiliar symbol that had appeared upon the ancient monument and the pendant. The moment Lysander approached, the engraved lines began glowing with soft silver light. Hidden mechanisms quietly awakened, and the bookshelf slowly rotated aside, revealing a narrow staircase descending beneath the palace. He hesitated only briefly before continuing downward. At the bottom waited a forgotten archive untouched by dust despite centuries of silence. Crystal lanterns illuminated shelves filled with beautifully preserved manuscripts unlike anything displayed upstairs. The pendant suddenly floated gently from beneath his robe, hovering above the center of the chamber. One ancient scroll slowly unrolled by itself. Across elegant golden lettering appeared a title that immediately captured his attention. Chronicle of the First Dawn. As Lysander began reading, fragmented memories stirred inside his mind. The manuscript spoke of an age when the empire had been guided not only by an emperor, but also by a royal heir known as the Lost Prince, whose sacred gift allowed truth itself to reveal hidden paths. According to the official records displayed throughout the palace, that prince had disappeared before history truly began. Yet the forgotten manuscript described something entirely different. It claimed the lost prince had never vanished. His existence had been deliberately erased, while his identity was sealed away to protect the empire until compassion once again outweighed ambition. Before Lysander could continue reading, another familiar presence entered the hidden archive. Emperor Cassian quietly descended the staircase without guards or ceremony. Instead of surprise, he simply looked around the chamber with calm recognition. "So the archive accepted you," he said softly. Lysander lifted the scroll. "None of this exists in the official history." Cassian slowly nodded. "Because someone wanted the world to forget." He walked toward another shelf and carefully removed a weathered journal bearing the imperial crest. Every emperor inherits fragments of a promise that no one fully understands. I spent years searching for the person these records described, but every trail ended in silence. Lysander looked at the glowing pendant resting peacefully above the stone table. "Why do I feel as though this place has been waiting for me?" Cassian answered without hesitation. "Perhaps because it has." At that exact moment, every crystal lantern inside the forgotten archive shone brilliantly. A magnificent mural hidden behind the shelves slowly revealed itself, depicting a graceful young prince standing beside the first emperor beneath a radiant white tree. Although the prince's face had faded with time, one detail remained perfectly preserved. Around his neck rested the very same silver pendant now floating before Lysander, while beneath the mural appeared four ancient words that neither time nor secrecy had managed to erase. "The lost prince will return. Some destinies remain invisible until someone chooses compassion over fear." The glowing words beneath the ancient mural slowly faded, yet their meaning lingered inside the hidden archive with unmistakable clarity. Lysander stood motionless before the weathered image of the forgotten prince, unable to ignore the impossible resemblance between the sacred pendant carved into the mural and the one resting against his chest. Emperor Cassian quietly observed the mural without speaking. His calm expression revealed neither excitement nor certainty, only the quiet patience of someone who had spent many years searching for answers. After several silent moments, he carefully rolled the ancient scroll closed and returned it to the stone table. "No emperor has ever entered this chamber with another person," he admitted softly. Until today. Lysander looked around the hidden archive, where thousands of untouched records rested beneath crystal lanterns that continued glowing with gentle white light. If this place has remained hidden for centuries, why reveal itself now? Cashin answered with complete honesty. Because it chose to reveal itself to you, not to me. Those simple words settled deeply within Lysander's heart. Before either of them could continue, the silver pendant suddenly released another pulse of warm light. The entire chamber responded immediately. Ancient shelves quietly shifted aside while elegant symbols appeared across the polished stone floor, forming a circular pathway leading toward an enormous crystal door concealed behind the mural. Neither force nor command opened the entrance. Instead, the pendant floated gently forward until it touched the center of the door. A soft chime echoed throughout the chamber as the ancient seal slowly dissolved into shimmering light. Beyond the doorway rested a magnificent sanctuary unlike anything inside the palace. White crystal pillars stretched toward a ceiling that reflected countless stars despite the daylight above. At the center of the sanctuary stood a tranquil pool whose perfectly still surface mirrored every movement like polished glass. Suspended above the water floated a delicate crystal blossom radiating peaceful white light. As Lysander stepped closer, gentle warmth spread through the sanctuary, and faint memories flickered through his mind. He could almost hear distant voices laughing beneath blooming white trees. A child reached toward someone wearing imperial robes. A familiar melody echoed softly before disappearing as quickly as it had arrived. The memories remained incomplete, yet they felt deeply personal. Cashin noticed the change in Lysander's expression but did not interrupt. Instead, he quietly approached the edge of the crystal pool. According to the oldest imperial journals, he said, this sanctuary was called the Chamber of First Light. Every generation searched for it, believing it protected the truth behind the empire's beginning. Lysander slowly reached toward the floating crystal blossom. Before his fingers touched it, the blossom unfolded into countless glowing petals that gently circled around him without causing harm. Each petal reflected fragments of forgotten history. Great celebrations beneath radiant banners. Scholars recording ancient knowledge. A graceful young prince standing beside the first emperor beneath the same crystal blossom now floating before him. Then one final image appeared. Unknown figures carefully removed the prince's portrait from an enormous ceremonial tapestry, while others locked priceless records behind stone walls. No battle followed. No destruction. Only deliberate silence. The vision quietly vanished, leaving the sanctuary peaceful once more. Cashin looked toward the crystal blossom with thoughtful understanding. Someone believed the truth was too dangerous to survive. Lysander gently lowered his hand. Or perhaps they feared what people would become if they remembered it. At that very moment, the crystal blossom released one final ray of light toward the ceiling. Far above the hidden sanctuary, deep within the oldest temple at the heart of the imperial capital, an ancient ceremonial bell that had remained silent for centuries rang once with a clear, gentle tone. Across the empire, elderly historians, temple keepers, and forgotten guardians quietly lifted their heads toward the sky, realizing that the sacred prophecy they had almost abandoned had finally begun to awaken once again. The greatest deception is not convincing people to believe a lie. It is teaching them to forget they ever knew the truth. The gentle sound of the ancient ceremonial bell echoed across the imperial capital long after its single clear note faded into silence. Throughout the palace, elderly scholars quietly paused their work. Temple guardians lifted their eyes toward the distant mountains, and forgotten keepers of ancient knowledge exchanged solemn glances without speaking. None of them had heard the sacred bell during their lifetimes. According to every official record, it had remained silent for nearly 1,000 years. Yet now it had awakened. Deep beneath the imperial palace, Lysander remained standing beside the tranquil crystal pool while the last glowing petals slowly dissolved into the peaceful air. The incomplete memories still lingered inside his heart. He could not yet remember every detail, but one certainty continued growing stronger with every passing moment. The forgotten prince shown throughout the hidden sanctuary was somehow connected to him in a way that reached far beyond coincidence. Emperor Cashin quietly approached the edge of the crystal pool and gently retrieved a weathered crystal tablet resting upon a marble pedestal. Fine golden letters slowly appeared across its surface as soon as the tablet entered the soft light surrounding Lysander. Neither of them touched the writing. The ancient message revealed itself naturally. Only the heart that chooses compassion before authority shall restore the first crown. Cassian carefully read the inscription before looking toward Lysander. Every previous emperor searched for the meaning of these words, he said softly. Most believed. They described the perfect ruler. Lysander slowly shook his head. Perhaps they described the person who reminds a ruler why the crown exists. The emperor smiled quietly. That answer feels far older than either of us. As they continued exploring the sanctuary, another hidden passage gradually revealed itself beyond the crystal pillars. Unlike the magnificent halls surrounding the pool, this corridor appeared simple and untouched, lined with beautifully preserved murals illustrating the earliest years of the empire. Each scene showed the first emperor standing beside a graceful young prince whose presence brought harmony wherever he walked. Villages flourished after his arrival. Ancient disputes ended peacefully. Children from distant kingdoms studied together beneath blooming white trees. The murals never portrayed the prince issuing commands or seeking power. Instead, he inspired unity simply through wisdom and kindness. Halfway through the corridor, however, the murals suddenly changed. New figures wearing ceremonial robes appeared before the royal court. They spoke quietly with nobles while hidden shadows spread across later scenes. The prince gradually disappeared from every celebration. His image became smaller with each mural until only empty spaces remained where he had once stood. Finally, the last mural displayed nothing except the first emperor standing alone beneath the sacred white tree. Someone had deliberately removed the prince from history without damaging the artwork itself. Lysander gently traced one empty section of polished stone. As his fingers touched the faded surface, invisible lines illuminated beneath centuries of concealment. The missing image briefly returned. The forgotten prince smiled peacefully while placing one hand upon the emperor's shoulder, and beneath them appeared another inscription hidden from ordinary sight. When fear governs memory, truth patiently waits beneath silence. Before either of them could reflect further, soft footsteps echoed from the corridor behind them. An elderly woman dressed in elegant white ceremonial robes slowly approached with calm dignity. She carried no weapon and displayed no fear. Instead, she respectfully bowed before both of them. "Your Majesty," she said gently, "Guardian of the First Archives reporting as promised." Cassian's expression softened with quiet recognition. So someone remained. The elderly guardian nodded. "For countless generations we preserved what little survived, believing the lost prince would one day return." She carefully looked toward Lysander before smiling warmly. "The sanctuary has already accepted you. There is only one place left where the complete truth still sleeps. Beyond the sacred white tree rests the Chamber of Crowns, where every forgotten name remains waiting to be spoken once again. Freedom does not begin when chains are broken. It begins when you finally remember who placed them there." The elderly guardian of the First Archives quietly led Lysander and Emperor Cassian beyond the final corridor until they reached the sacred white tree resting at the heart of the hidden sanctuary. Unlike every tree growing within the imperial gardens, this magnificent tree radiated a gentle silver glow through every branch, while countless crystal leaves shimmered without the slightest breeze. Beneath its enormous roots stood an elegant circular doorway carved from luminous white stone. Ancient symbols slowly awakened as Lysander approached, responding to the silver pendant resting against his chest. The guardian stepped aside respectfully. "Only those acknowledged by the first dawn may enter the Chamber of Crowns," she explained softly. "No guardian, no emperor, and no scholar has crossed its threshold for nearly 1,000 years." Lysander exchanged a quiet glance with Cassian before gently placing one hand upon the glowing doorway. Instead of opening immediately, warm light spread through the ancient stone until a familiar transparent screen unexpectedly appeared before his eyes once again. Hidden mission updated. Restore the forgotten crown. Secondary directive canceled. Original authority disconnected. Before Lysander could fully read the message, fractures spread across the floating screen. One line after another dissolved into silver dust until only a single sentence remained. "Choice now belongs to you." The entire system vanished forever. A peaceful silence filled his heart unlike anything he had experienced since arriving in this world. No invisible commands remained. No unseen force directed his future. Every path ahead would now be chosen by his own will. The ancient doorway slowly opened. Beyond it rested the Chamber of Crowns, an immense sanctuary illuminated by floating spheres of crystal light. 12 magnificent crowns hovered peacefully above marble pedestals arranged in a perfect circle, each representing one generation of rulers who had protected the empire. At the very center floated an empty pedestal bathed in pure white radiance. As Lysander stepped forward, the silver pendant gently lifted into the air before settling above the empty pedestal. Soft music echoed through the chamber, although no musicians could be seen. Then the impossible happened. Every crystal sphere surrounding the chamber transformed into living memories. Lysander watched countless scenes unfold before him. He saw the original lost prince walking beside the first emperor, not as a ruler seeking power, but as a trusted guide, whose wisdom united kingdoms without conquest. He witnessed ancient ceremonies where compassion held greater authority than rank. Finally, the memories reached their final chapter. A council of frightened nobles secretly begged the lost prince to disappear. They feared future rulers would become dependent upon kindness instead of control. Rather than resisting them, the lost prince willingly accepted a sacred seal to preserve peace, entrusting the first dawn to future generations when the world became ready to remember. As the vision faded, forgotten memories awakened inside Lysander with crystal clarity. He remembered standing beneath this very tree centuries earlier. He remembered choosing sacrifice instead of conflict. Most importantly, he remembered that he had never been abandoned. He had willingly entrusted his own future to hope. Tears quietly formed in his eyes, not from sorrow but from understanding. Cassian stepped beside him without speaking. He simply offered his hand. Lysander accepted it with a grateful smile. "I finally remember," he whispered. "The throne was never meant to belong to me." Cassian looked toward the empty pedestal glowing at the center of the chamber. "Then why did history wait for your return?" Lysander's expression became peaceful. "Because someone had to remind every generation why a crown exists." At that exact moment, the empty pedestal released an immense pillar of white light that pierced the ceiling and rose high above the imperial palace. Throughout the entire empire, people stopped to watch the sacred radiance illuminate the sky. Deep within forgotten temples, sealed libraries, and abandoned sanctuaries, ancient doors began opening one after another as every remaining fragment of the first dawn quietly prepared to return to the world once again. The truest rulers are not those who claim a crown. They are the ones who would willingly set it aside for the people they love. The brilliant pillar of white light continued rising above the imperial palace, illuminating the entire capital with a peaceful radiance unlike anything witnessed in living memory. Across distant provinces, ancient temples answered the sacred light as forgotten bells rang together in perfect harmony. Citizens gathered in silent wonder beneath the glowing sky, sensing that history itself had begun to awaken. Inside the Chamber of Crowns, the magnificent light gradually softened until the floating crystal spheres settled peacefully above their marble pedestals once again. Lysander quietly lowered his gaze toward the empty pedestal where the silver pendant now rested. Although countless forgotten memories had returned, he felt no desire for authority or recognition. Instead, he felt only gratitude that the truth had survived long enough to be remembered. Emperor Cassian stood beside him with quiet admiration. He had watched the sacred memories unfold with his own eyes, yet one question still remained unanswered. "The Empire will soon learn who you truly are," he said gently. "Many will ask you to reclaim the throne that history denied you." Lysander smiled peacefully before looking toward the ancient crowns suspended throughout the chamber. "The lost prince never existed to replace an emperor," he answered. "He existed to remind every ruler why they were entrusted with power in the first place." Cassian listened carefully, then slowly nodded. "Then I will honor that purpose." Together, they followed the guardian of the first archives toward another hidden passage leading upward from the sanctuary. As they reached the final staircase, warm morning sunlight welcomed them into the sacred hall above the palace. Waiting there were elderly temple keepers, respected scholars, provincial representatives, and members of the imperial council who had quietly gathered after witnessing the heavenly light. None of them knelt immediately. Instead, They watched Lysander with expressions filled not with fear, but with hope and uncertainty. The oldest temple keeper stepped forward carrying an elegant ceremonial scroll preserved since the earliest generation of the empire. He respectfully opened it before the assembly. According to the First Covenant, he announced, when the lost prince returns, he may choose the future of the empire. Silence settled across the hall. Every eye turned toward Lysander. He could have accepted absolute authority. He could have claimed the forgotten birthright that had finally returned. Instead, he slowly walked toward Emperor Cassian and gently placed the silver pendant into his hands. A soft murmur spread throughout the gathering. Cassian looked at him with quiet surprise. "This belongs to you." Lysander shook his head with a peaceful smile. Its purpose was never to create another king. It exists to remind every ruler that compassion must always stand beside the crown. I trust you to protect that promise. The moment Cassian accepted the pendant, the sacred light surrounding the hall expanded warmly rather than intensely. The ancient covenant itself seemed to acknowledge the choice. The guardian quietly smiled. "The prophecy has been fulfilled exactly as it was written," she whispered. "Not through conquest, but through trust freely given." The Imperial Council respectfully lowered their heads. For the first time in generations, their loyalty was offered willingly rather than demanded by tradition. Outside the palace, people from every province continued, gathering beneath the radiant sky, unaware that the future of the empire had just been transformed by a single act of selfless faith instead of ambition. As Lysander and Cassian stepped together onto the palace balcony overlooking the awakening capital, countless white birds soared gracefully across the morning light. Far beyond the city walls, hidden mountains shimmered with gentle silver radiance, as though another ancient place had quietly answered the return of the first dawn, waiting for one final truth to be revealed before the story of the lost prince could truly reach its peaceful conclusion. Hope becomes strongest when truth is shared instead of protected. As the first rays of morning spread across the imperial capital, the peaceful white light that had surrounded the palace gradually reached every province of the empire. Hidden temples quietly opened their ancient gates, forgotten libraries unlocked sealed chambers, and countless historical records that had remained concealed for generations began revealing their original words. The people did not witness destruction or conflict. They witnessed understanding. Inside the sacred hall, Emperor Cassian and Lysander stood together before the assembled council while the guardian of the first archives carefully carried the oldest crystal chronicle ever preserved. With gentle hands, she placed it upon a circular marble pedestal at the center of the hall. The crystal immediately responded to the silver pendant resting around Cassian's neck, releasing countless streams of warm white light that floated peacefully throughout the chamber. Every glowing fragment transformed into living memories visible to everyone present. They saw the first emperor standing beside the original lost prince beneath the sacred white tree. They watched villages prosper through compassion rather than fear. They witnessed scholars, guardians, and rulers working together without pride or division. Finally, they saw the painful decision that had changed history forever. Terrified advisors had begged the lost prince to disappear, believing future generations would lose respect for authority if kindness became the empire's highest virtue. The lost prince accepted the sacred seal willingly, not because he feared those advisors, but because he trusted that one day humanity would mature enough to remember the truth without destroying itself. As the memories ended, silence filled the sacred hall. Many elders quietly lowered their heads, realizing that the mistakes carried through generations had never begun with hatred. They had begun with fear. Emperor Cassian slowly stepped forward. His voice remained calm as he addressed every representative gathered before him. Today we restore more than forgotten history. We restore the purpose of the empire itself. No applause followed. Instead, every council member respectfully bowed, not to the emperor alone, but also toward Lysander, whose quiet compassion had revealed the truth without demanding power in return. Outside the palace, identical visions appeared across the empire as crystal monuments awakened one after another. Farmers paused in peaceful fields. Teachers gathered students beneath ancient trees. Travelers stood beside mountain roads watching forgotten memories unfold within shimmering light. Everywhere people discovered the same story. The lost prince had never ruled through conquest. He had united hearts through wisdom, patience, and trust. That single revelation transformed generations of misunderstanding into quiet hope. Later that afternoon, Lysander walked with Cassian through the restored gardens where neglected flowers had unexpectedly begun blooming once more. Crystal streams reflected the clear blue sky, while white birds rested peacefully among flowering branches. "Do you regret refusing the throne?" Cassian asked gently. Lysander smiled as he watched children laughing beyond the palace walls. "No, a throne can guide laws. It cannot teach kindness. People must choose that for themselves." Cassian nodded thoughtfully. "Then perhaps this empire finally has its greatest teacher." Before Lysander could answer, the guardian approached carrying one final crystal tablet recovered from the deepest chamber beneath the sacred white tree. Unlike every previous record, its surface remained completely blank. "There is only one page history never completed," she explained softly. "The final chapter has always belonged to those who restored the first dawn." Lysander and Cassian looked together at the untouched crystal. As they gently placed their hands upon its smooth surface, golden letters slowly appeared for the very first time. They did not record victories, titles, or royal bloodlines. Instead, they formed a simple promise. May every generation choose compassion before authority, truth before fear, and hope before silence. The moment the final words were written, a distant mountain beyond the capital began shining with soft silver light, revealing the last forgotten sanctuary where the complete legacy of the first dawn had patiently waited for centuries, preparing one final gift before the story of the lost prince reached its peaceful ending. The brightest future is never inherited. It is created by those who choose compassion every single day. The distant mountain bathed in gentle silver light welcomed Lysander, Emperor Cassian, and the guardian of the first archives as they followed the ancient stone pathway leading toward the final sanctuary of the first dawn. Unlike the hidden chambers beneath the palace, this sacred place stood openly beneath the clear sky, surrounded by crystal lakes, blooming white flowers, and towering trees whose silver leaves shimmered peacefully in the morning breeze. There were no walls guarding its entrance because the sanctuary had never been built to keep people away. It had simply waited for the world to become worthy of remembering it. At the center of the sanctuary rested a magnificent crystal mirror reflecting not appearances, but the truth carried within every heart. As Lysander stepped before it, the mirror revealed every chapter of his journey. He saw the ordinary life he had once lived before arriving in this unfamiliar world. He watched himself awaken inside the abandoned residence of a forgotten concubine. He witnessed every choice he had made afterward, every act of kindness, every moment of patience, every decision to understand instead of judge. None of those moments had been small. Together, they had quietly restored an empire that had forgotten its own soul. The mirror then reflected Emperor Cassian. It revealed a ruler who had carried enormous responsibility without allowing authority to harden his heart. Rather than seeking absolute control, he had chosen trust even when uncertainty surrounded him. The mirror's gentle light joined their reflections together until both images became one peaceful vision beneath the sacred white tree. The guardian smiled with quiet satisfaction. The first dawn recognizes not titles, but harmony. The crystal mirror slowly dissolved into countless glowing lights that drifted upward across the sanctuary before spreading throughout the sky above the empire. Everywhere those lights traveled, people discovered forgotten wisdom hidden within familiar places. Teachers found lost manuscripts inside old classrooms. Families uncovered stories preserved by their ancestors. Temples welcomed every traveler regardless of origin or status. The empire gradually transformed not because new laws demanded change, but because ordinary people chose kindness after remembering the truth. Months passed peacefully. The abandoned western residence where Lysander had first awakened became a welcoming academy dedicated to history, diplomacy, and compassion. Children from every province studied together beneath crystal trees, while scholars carefully preserved the authentic records of the first dawn for future generations. Emperor Cassian often visited without ceremony, joining lessons and listening to students whose curiosity reminded him why the empire deserved hope. One quiet evening, He found Lysander sitting beside the same tranquil lake where their paths had first crossed. White blossoms floated gently across the water as the setting sun painted the sky with warm gold and soft silver. Cassian sat beside him without speaking for several moments before finally smiling. "The palace still asks whether you will become my queen." Lysander laughed softly, the peaceful sound blending with the evening breeze. "Perhaps they are asking the wrong question." Cassian looked at him with gentle curiosity. Lysander continued, "What matters is not the title they choose for us. What matters is the future we choose. Together." Cassian quietly reached for his hand, and Lysander accepted without hesitation. Neither of them needed crowns to understand the promise they shared. Beneath the glowing branches of the sacred white tree, the first dawn quietly illuminated the horizon once more. Generations later, people no longer remembered the forgotten concubine abandoned by history. They remembered the lost prince whose compassion restored the truth, and the emperor whose wisdom welcomed it. Their story became more than a legend. It became a promise carried from one generation to the next, reminding every child that genuine strength begins with kindness. Enduring love grows through trust, and the brightest future belongs to those courageous enough to choose hope before fear, truth before silence, and one another before every crown the world could ever offer.